Hello and welcome back. My name is Dan. Today we're going to be talking about Aspire and why you should be using that for modern C# development. We're going to talk about kind of what it is at a high level, and then get into why I've basically switched over to any project I use. I'm trying to Aspirefy it. There's a couple great resources that I'm going to point to at the end of the video, as well as an interview with the project manager. Kevin Bost had a interview with the project manager over at Aspire. It was really interesting to hear just some of the challenges and some of the amazing things that the Aspire team is doing recently, and just that it's a fun, fast-moving team. But what is Aspire, first off? So it is a tool for developers, right? Originally, it was kind of marketed as a platform, but nowadays it is a tool for developers. It is a codified way to streamline your applications. So focus on the code, not infrastructure. That's kind of one of their things. So Aspire helps you go directly into the cloud, right? Everything has an integration. So we'll get into a couple of the examples, and I have some templates that I've made using Aspire to really quickly get you started. But there's just some amazing things about Aspire, namely this app, Aspire app dashboard, right? This dashboard allows you to really quickly go from, I have to start up 7 different projects in this distributed system to, I just have telemetry logs through my API service and through my app. Some of the other things that are really nice is, if we go over here, is the flexible deployments, right? Whether you are deploying in the cloud, right? It's a cloud native tool, but it's meant to be adapted to any environment. But you have consistent deployments, you have your built-in telemetry, you have your health checks, you have debugs starting really quick, right? With old projects, you'd have to set environment variables. You'd have to go in and say, okay, well, I have these 7 different startup projects, and I need to make sure I start my API first. Then I do my app over here. Then I need to run a processing command or whatever it is. But the app host just does everything for you, right? If you look at this, very simple. We could just add a couple of these things. Maybe we'll take off the deployment option just to keep it simple. But oh yeah, all of my applications have these kind of 4 things, right? Or maybe 3 things if you don't want the container, but I have a database in the back end. I have an API that references that database, and then my front end references my API. That's it. There's no magic strings. It's just Aspire is really just using environment variables under the covers, but doing it for you. So you don't have to say, oh, I need to pass in my port. I need to pass in my API URL to the front end. I need to make sure my database structure is connected. And it's really amazing at doing those things in multiple different languages. So maybe you need Python. There's a package for that. For JavaScript, there's a package for that. For .NET, of course, there's packages for that because that's what it's built for. But if there's not integrations, you can write them your own. Aspire is built as a tool that's really extensible, right? If there's not a plugin, you can write your own app plugin to be able to model your application in a code-first way. You get compile time checks. So if it's not going to compile, you know your app's not working, right? There's an extra sanity check there that's really nice. But overview, if we're going to move to the entity framework, this is where kind of I've done a lot of my work is, I have an API with an EF Core backend, and I set up all the things. And this is kind of a first-class citizen in Aspire, right? A lot of these things, say Azure SQL, they have the needed integrations to just have, right? So Aspire, Microsoft Entity Framework, Core SQL Server, instead of doing a big long connection string or using an app settings, in the app host, I just create it, right? And if you're defining a Azure SQL that's actually already deployed, and you're not deploying it as part of the deployment of Aspire, right? It's already there, it's already configured. Then you just configure those as variables. So when you run the application, you say, give me the subscription, give me the resource group, give me the things that I need to access this Azure SQL. So that turns into some really nice code that really quickly gets you up and running. So for an example, I have an Aspire EF, Aspire MCP, and a SQL MCP. The SQL MCP is just the data API builder under the covers. But if we look at this Aspire host, you see that I have a couple extra things here. So I have the Postgres. I have a Postgres DB as well because I want to be able to have a database inside of my Postgres flexible server, right? So I've deployed at this point a Postgres flexible server to Azure, and locally I'm running as a container just for this template. But you can see when I start the orchestration, I'd get dbgate just in the browser, and now I can just give this reference to Postgres, so the environment variables just populate. And they wait for the migrations to finish, so it doesn't start anything. It doesn't start my API until my migration services run. We can look at that for a second. I have just a standard background service, a .NET background service that starts an activity of migrating database, where it just migrates my database with these migrations, right? And it's doing these things in a logical, defined, deterministic way, which is really, really nice. So it's not the developer has to remember to go start the migrations, right? You can also have that in the program and have the same thing just on startup. But now your migration service is off to the side here. And that's one way to do it, right? It's an opinionated framework, but it gives you so much flexibility at running things and orchestrating your applications. And I've just found it to be such a nice dev cycle. Another one, now I have an MCP, and maybe I want the MCP inspector, right? I get that directly from my app host, right? This is MCP inspector with my MCP. So my MCP server is just a standard project, has some external HTTP, and it's waiting for a database. And this is a template, so there's some pragmas, but I also have a project, a Blazor front end, right? And I just add it. I just add a reference for the MCP server, and I wait for it to start. And then I just run the application. It's as simple as that. I think Aspire just bundles a lot of the things really nicely that are already part of .NET, but weren't first-class citizens, right? They weren't enabled by default. Things like service discovery or retries on HTTP. This service default project that comes with Aspire is doing so many cool things, right? If you want to uncomment and do allowed schemes only HTTPS, that's built in from Aspire, right? Add service discovery, add standard resilience handler. They are doing open telemetry. In this case, I've added the HTTP client instrumentation and Azure Monitor just out of the box, right? Now I don't need to do a bunch of open telemetry exporters every time I start a new project. It just comes out of the box, right? As soon as I go here, go to my server, go to my program CS, just right at the top, builder.add service defaults. And that happens with Aspire, right? Those same things could have been done without Aspire, but now it's just out of the box, and it's kind of, you fall into success, which is really, really nice from Aspire. And then finally, I've built apps that all of my apps lately have been, and part of the reason I started streaming is because I wanted to learn Aspire, because I was moving on to a project that had Aspire. But I have a trading card game that has migration service. It has a card importer. This is like a one-time background process, but I can go to a dashboard in Azure, like I've shown you, and I can pull it up to the side here, but it's really nice to be able to view the dashboard, right? Because in a deployed Azure environment, I can actually go and say, oh, let me look at these logs and trace them, right? I also have it set up within App Insights to be able to do standard App Insights things, but I actually prefer looking at the Azure or the Aspire dashboard instead of Azure. So we'll go here. This is a deployed Aspire application, and you can look at these resources, right? And I can just go here. What is it doing right now? Looks like I got some Azure Blob Storage requests, and I have info because it's a dev. But I can just go to traces and just see what it's doing, right? And this is all out of the box. I don't have to do any special things, but Aspire just gives you these things. So, we're getting cards, someone's creating a deck, those kind of things. But you just get some really cool metrics out of the box. So, and the reason I bring this up and the reason I'm talking about Aspire today is because as we get more and more to a fast moving, everything's about just shipping speed. Aspire is really helping you fall into the correct paths of, okay, if I start an application, I get so many things out of the box. I get resiliency, I get logging, I get observability, and you don't have to do anything, and you just start up a new app. So if you're looking to get into C#, look at Aspire to do your projects. Do some cool projects in Aspire, and just see what it can do, right? The standard application of an API, an app, and a database is just really nice in Aspire. So just that, I'm going to be talking about that, but I hope everyone has a good day, and I will put some links in the description about some really cool Aspire resources and that interview. But until then, happy coding.